Welcome back to pixelprojectradio. This is part 2 of our critical analysis on Detroit Become Human. If you're finding this episode or this show for the first time, maybe check out episode 1 before continuing. Today, we are going to pick up right where we left off last time. There's a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right into it. Of course, I am joined once again by esteemed guest Nomad from the Retro Wildlands. Nomad, how's it going?
It's going very well, Rick. It is a pleasure to be back in front of the microphone with you and continue this journey into Detroit.
Just a couple of things before we dive back into the story. There was one thing that I think we forgot to bring up, Nomad, and it's the smallest thing. In the chapter where Kara is cleaning Todd's house, this is a small detail that I wanted to bring up now because it's going to be pertinent later on, very germane to an ending discussion. When Kara is cleaning up, she sees a magazine. Players don't get to see the magazine when she is looking at it. You do get to see it as she picks it up. There's some kind of a young android girl on the cover. But as she is looking at it, as Kara is looking at it, we don't get to see the front. We just see Kara looking at it from sort of behind the magazine's point of view, and we see her LED sort of flash yellow, which in this universe signifies some sort of heightened emotional state, distress, something like that. That's all that's said about that at the time, but I wanted to float it here because it will come back in the next episode.
Yeah, good call. Stuff like this, too, happens a lot in games where they'll give you just a little glimpse of something's not quite right, and it won't be referenced until much later. So, yeah, this is definitely important.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I have written down here, there is going to be more talk on the differences between androids and humans. I think in this episode, I wanted to say that up front. I feel like I was maybe not the best at facilitating that discussion last time, but we'll see more of that here because we're getting into more of the meat of, I think, what David Cage is hoping to convey here. Whether or not he does is up to the viewers, but we're getting into that more here. So without further ado, let's jump back in. We stopped last time at the end of Chapter 5, so we're starting at Chapter 6, titled Broken. This sees Marcus and Carl returning home from a gala, and Carl says something that is truer than anything I've ever heard with regard to art. He says, nobody gives a damn about art. All they care about is how much money they're going to make out of it. Too true.
Yeah, very true. It was too disappointing to hear that, too. I don't partake in art nearly as much as I would like personally, but I remember shaking my head when he said that. Very disappointing, but true, unfortunately.
You see it everywhere, and it was interesting being in the classical musician field during a time, 2010s, 15s, 2020, when streaming is so popular, where students are sharing living composers' work with each other so folks don't have to buy it so they could save money. There's a lot of like double standards and eyes wide shut sort of attitudes whenever it comes to ethics and things of that nature, especially when it comes to art and paying artists and things like that. It's almost not worth decrying because that's just the landscape now. That's what we have to live with. We will never return to a pre-Spotify, pre-YouTube time. So it's not worth pining for what used to be for halcyon days. But I don't know. That's a different podcast entirely. I don't want to bring a negative rant in right away.
Yeah, it definitely gives you something to think about, though. That is for sure.
Speaking of making money off of it, somebody wants to make money off of Carl's art. There's an intruder among us. And that intruder is Leo. David Cage portrayed Leo, if you'll remember, as somebody that is addicted to drugs, so why wouldn't he come to ransack the place? I'm still a little sore about that, but it's fine. It is Leo, in fact. Marcus calls the cops remotely, which is one of the things that androids can do. And there's a confrontation, with Leo accusing Carl of liking Marcus more than him.
Leo, what's going on?
You refuse to help me, so I'm helping myself. It's crazy what some people pay for this shit.
Don't touch him.
Look, they're all gonna be mine sooner or later anyway. Just think of it as a down payment on my inheritance.
Marcus, get him away from there. Get him out of here.
And this is Marcus's breaking point. This is where Marcus is about to break Deviant. And what's interesting is, if you remember with Kara's breaking into deviancy, when we see that sort of wireframe model that represents Kara's will bashing up against Kara's rationality, obediency versus the true self, there were lines of text and phrases around that sort of signified her thoughts. And with Kara, it was centered around protecting Alice, disobeying Todd to protect Alice. With Marcus, it has a much more aggressive and sort of individualistic revolutionary tint. But we get to see a bit of the android's personality shine through when it comes to that. It's a nice little touch. But they prompt Marcus to think for himself. Leo continues to bully him.
Go ahead, hit me. What you waiting for? Think you're a man? Act like one.
Stop it!
What's the matter? Too much of a pussy?
Stop it, Leo! Stop it!
Too scared to fight back, you fucking bitch!
And then Marcus breaks free. He breaks into deviancy.
Yeah, this was an interesting scene because it starts off with Leo harassing Marcus, but Carl is very adamant towards Marcus and tells him specifically, do not defend yourself. And that's really what prompts those deviant thoughts. Why shouldn't I defend myself? And the things that you see flash on screen. And once you break free, then that's when you as the player are then given that choice to either defend yourself or endure. What did you end up doing your first time through with this one?
My first time through, I defended myself against Carl's wishes. I ended up pushing Leo. And what happens is you push him. Carl gets a little bit upset. Leo is on the floor unconscious. And Carl tells you to get out of here. He tells you the cops are coming. They're about to get here. Go, get out of here. Get out of here now. Yeah,
it was pretty powerful stuff. And I want to share kind of a quick story, too, to kind of talk about why it is that I made the choice that I made. I did exactly the same thing. I chose to defend myself, and Marcus hauls off and shoves Leo, and he falls and smacks his head. But in that moment, I was actually taken back to an earlier point in my life, back in, I think I was in middle school, actually, and I probably can't imagine this, but I was the nerdy kid back in school. I was the one with very few friends, and I had what I felt like was my assigned bully. I had a bully that would torment me constantly and come and knock my books out of my hand, stuff like that. And it was actually an instance, and actually completely unrelated, I told this story to my kids and my wife at dinner just the other night, actually. This particular bully of mine ran into me at the library. I was dropping books off, and he came out of the door and was starting to torment me with his 2 hired goons. And I remember feeling a lot of the same stuff. Like, I've just been putting up with this for years, and I'm getting frustrated, and I'm feeling anger boil in me. And I ended up, after he knocked the books out of my hand, and I still don't know why, I punched this kid square in the nose and broke his nose. And off he ran.
Nice.
Yeah. And I felt that way when I was watching Marcus endure and go through this scene. And my thought was the only way to truly make this stop is to make a show of aggression. And that really what drove my decision in this moment. So fun fact about myself and what kind of drew me there. Like, I could not think of a reason why to continue to endure here. But on the other end, I did want to share something I also really liked about this scene. If you do decide to endure as Marcus, what ends up happening to Carl is he becomes so distressed, he collapses and falls out of his wheelchair. I think Jesse Williams, who is the motion capture and voice actor for Marcus, does such an incredible job in this scene. He runs over to Carl, bends down, starts crying, and even refers to Carl as Dad as Carl's slipping into unconsciousness. And I thought that acting was done exceptionally well.
Carl. He was a fragile machine.
Carl, don't leave, okay? Please don't go. Don't leave.
Remember, Marcus, don't let anybody tell you who you are.
No. Dad. No. Please.
This is all your fault. This never would have happened if it weren't for you.
I kind of forgot he was an android for a second, and maybe the game did too for a moment, but I wanted to share that too. I thought that was incredibly well done.
It's very touching, yeah. Unfortunately, that thread, if Carl does die, it doesn't really get resurrected at all or brought back or elaborated upon. It sort of stops there, and Marcus's arc continues with the sort of civil rights bent, civil rights slavery angle. But it is a very touching scene. We should note, regardless of what happens here, whether Marcus obeys or disobeys, the police show up and end up shooting Marcus. If Carl dies, Leo will say, "Marcus attacked my dad." They shoot you. If Leo flees after you push him, they see you on the ground with Carl, and they mistake you for the robber, and they shoot you. So either way, it's lights out for you. And that takes us into Chapter 7, Interrogation. We're back with Connor and Hank. If you remember from last episode, they just caught a deviant, and they're going to interrogate it. The deviant won't talk. He's stressed, and deviants are prone to self-destruction, we learn from Connor. So this is a total scene out of a buddy cop movie. Connor, the new rookie, offers to try to get some info out of him. Gavin scoffs. The rookie's going to do it. And Hank says, well, what do we got to lose? So you get to interrogate the deviant. Now, this section highlights two things that I find perplexing and deleterious to this game. So we mentioned in the last episode about the whiplash, the tonal whiplash of conversation, and how depending on how you're role-playing or what dialogue options you choose, the role-playing experience can feel very disjointed, lopsided, because you'll go from one demeanor to another, just back and forth, almost herky-jerky. And the same thing can happen here. Due in part to the second part of this is a sort of mini game where you have to get the deviant stress in an acceptable range. I don't know the numbers offhand. It's something like, 65 to 75%, let's say. Any lower, you're not going to get a confession. Any higher, it'll self-destruct out of stress. So you have to get it right into that slot. But as you do that, as you go up and down, you say things to stress it out, to get the stress up, you say things to calm it down. The dialogue is just incredibly disjointed. I think the last time I said something to the effect of soggy puzzle pieces. It feels like that. Things don't fit quite right. You know, Connor is being very understanding and sincere one moment, and then the next saying that he's going to shut him down and probe his memory. It's very strange.
Yeah, this was the first time I really found myself questioning what sort of tonal approach they were really trying to go for, not just with this chapter, but with this game sometimes too. And yeah, the dialogue tone changes are very abrupt. Like, it's quite simply Connor's trying to be nice in some instances. Come on, talk to me. I'll make sure the humans don't shut you down. And then it gets to a point where he, like you said, threatens to probe his memory, and he's very fierce. And it's all in favor of trying to just balance a meter that's on screen. So while I largely like this chapter for what it's trying to do, I love the atmosphere that's cold and machine-like, and the music in this moment does a superb job to match that tone. But at the end of the day, you're just pressing buttons to balance a meter, and I felt very disjointed myself in this as well. Like, I like this chapter, but I wish they would have done it differently, I guess, but I'm not entirely sure how they would either, so I suppose it serves a purpose.
I mean, how they would have made it just a more straightforward conversation. I think this is one of the inherent downsides to this approach that Cage and his team want to take. This incoherency of character motivation and attitude and dialogue, it's just part of the struggle with this, and they tip the boat a little too far in service of making like what is essentially a mini game. And yeah, I don't know. I do think it suffers for it, but regardless, it might self-destruct. It might not give you anything, but if you get it right into the sweet spot, it gives you the lowdown on why it did what it did. Here's what he says.
He tortured me every day. I did whatever he told me, but there was always something wrong. Then one day, he took a bat and started hitting me. For the first time, I felt Scared. Scared he might destroy me. Scared I might die.
The android felt threatened. It felt abused. It felt threatened, and self-preservation kicked in. Again, we're back to this empathetic human emotion. This, what David Cage and his team seem to be equating with qualia, right? Remember, we talked about phenomenal consciousness, what it means to be a human. Here, it's suggested that maybe that is empathetic, individualistic drive, self-preservation, recognizing the self, no obedience, things like that. Moreover, this is also where RA9 begins to get mentioned very heavily. The truth is inside, I think, is what this deviant says. What do you make of RA9, Nomad? What's your I don't want to say what's your take on this, like how do you interpret it? Overall, we're going to talk more about that moving forward. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on them using RA9 and how they use it in this game?
Yeah, at first when you see any mention of RA9, I think it's when you're in the house where this deviant is and he scrawls it all over the inside of the shower stall, I think it is. And at first it didn't really make much sense and I kind of had some different theories, but as soon as this particular deviant mentions RA9 and the significance to it, my mind immediately went to Christianity, Christ, the Savior, Son of God type of mentality here. And it almost seemed too easy, if that makes sense. Like, I can...
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, I love the idea that as these androids begin to become sentient and they're forming their own thoughts and they're feeling human emotions or at least the simulation thereof, it kind of makes sense to try to go towards, say, a religious sort of an angle, or humans do it all the time. We either use or embrace religion to try to, whether it's to justify existence or actions or what's going to happen when we eventually die. And it's all very enthralling. And I kind of like the idea that this android is kind of peeking into this way of thinking, but I don't know. It seemed too easy, if that's even the right word. I wouldn't say forced, but it's not the angle I was hoping they would go. At least that's what formed immediately in my head. Maybe there was a different direction the writers were trying to go, but I don't know. It felt a little heavy-handed. I don't dislike it, but it was just kind of one of those, okay, I guess I see where this is going. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think your interpretation is apt. It's a stand-in for religion, right? That's one of the things that makes humanity unique, that makes us different from other intelligent beings, is faith, what it means to have faith and what it means to have religion. And I think that would be an incredibly interesting angle to go down. So once again, we're window shopping with all of these really fascinating ethical and philosophical ideas. What does it mean to have religion, to have faith? And what would that look like with an artificial but sentient life form? How does faith play a role in something that is inherently based off of nothing but logic? Well, we don't really know because they don't explore it. It is a stand-in for religion, and it's the images of the Savior coming in, of belief will keep us whole and satiate our soul. All of that is all through here, but they don't really do much with it. That's, I suppose, spoiler alert, but RA9 is brought up throughout the entire game, and it's never really explained. And I don't mean to say that they had to. I don't mean to say that they need to have explained it to make it interesting. What I'm saying is the combination of not explaining it and not exploring it, that combination together, it's like at that point, why is it here? It's not, and it's not even like a MacGuffin or a red herring necessarily, because everything else that's going to happen in the plot drives it forward perfectly fine. It feels superfluous in a way, which is unfortunate, because I mean, I would have been very cool to explore what an AI-based religion and faith would have been and would have looked like, and what function it would have served to them. I don't know. It would have been very cool. I think, and there aren't any hard answers in the wiki either. I think a lot of folks say that RA9 is sort of an idealized version of Marcus, the first to awaken. I think that's probably the strongest interpretation outside of just a faith fabricated from their desires and needs.
Yeah, you summed this up perfectly. And I think even just to try to further clarify my point, I'll keep it brief. I think I went with the word easy just because as I thought about it more, like you'd said, wonderful ideas that I wish they would have explored a little further. And it is very easy to kind of pin the RA9 moniker on Marcus as he continues to go throughout his journey. He is arguably the first to awaken, or at least it's kind of how he's perceived. So it all makes sense from that standpoint. But this game continues to go towards some amazing topics and discussions that could potentially be had as they explore these things, but they left this one go a little bit too. So I say easy because it's a great insert that we don't do much of anything with, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's something fundamentally understood to all of us, and I think that inherently makes it a little bit disappointing that we don't see much done with it. Regardless, though, this chapter will end with Gavin coming in. They're going to take the deviant away. This is another instance where it can self-destruct because Gavin is, of course, a huge asshole, and you can intervene. If you intervene, you can ensure that the deviant gets out safely. You have to do it a couple times. Gavin will pull his gun on you and tell you to quit your shit, and then Hank will pull his gun on Gavin and tell Gavin to quit his shit. Protocol just being broken all around here. If you don't intervene, the deviant will self-destruct.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting scene, regardless of how it plays out. But it's funny you say that. That was my takeaway too. Nope, we're just pointing guns at each other now. To hell with the rules.
This is America. On to the next chapter. It's titled Fugitives. We have a couple of quicker ones coming up, and this is one of them. Fugitives sees Kara and Alice trying to find shelter for the night, and this can go down in a couple of different ways. 3 ways this can go down. How did this play out for you the first time around?
So the very first time I played this, I found a abandoned house, a squat as the game likes to call it, and I found a way to navigate through a mesh fence, get into the squat, and ultimately that's where I spent the night, leaving out some details for now, of course.
Yeah, the squatting in the abandoned house is what will get you the most story content. You meet a character named Ralph. If you don't do that, you can sleep in an abandoned car, in a parking lot, in like a junkyard, rather. Junkyard, parking lot, kind of both. Or you can get some money and stay in a hotel nearby.
I ended up doing all of these particular paths on subsequent playthroughs, and like you said, the abandoned house is by far the best from a story standpoint. The hotel is interesting, the different things you need to do to be able to procure money, to procure a disguise so you don't look like an android, to be able to stay at the motel. I kind of liked what you had to do to get there, but the payoff isn't all that great once you get there, I felt like, from a story standpoint. And then staying in the abandoned car in the scrapyard, Alice is extremely adamant that that is something she does not in any way, shape, or form want to do, no matter how secluded they are from the police or anyone pursuing them. And it's actually to a point where if you decide to do that, it's your quickest, easiest way out of this chapter. But Alice's, I'll call it approval rating of Kara goes down so far that I did this once and she actually became distant from Kara. And was like, oh, I think I've just ruined the game by sleeping in the back of this car.
Well, you would think that based on the red ink on the paper, right? I think that was the analogy I used the last time, when the little telltale tells you that your relationship is hurting. But really, it doesn't work that way. Like, I'm role-playing this second time around. I'm still finishing up my second playthrough for this episode as we record in real time. I'm role-playing as Kara being kind of negligent and uncaring, but that's not the story David Cage and his team want to tell. So even though you can do that, the grand skeleton of the story still takes you through all those story beats of Kara being a maternal figure. So there's this dissonance. I don't know. It doesn't work. I don't want to bring this up and harp on it and be a broken record every time it comes up. But since you did, I figured might as well. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why we're role playing that. Why he's allowing us to role play that, given there's clearly a story he wants to tell, and it's okay. Like, tell your story, man. It's okay to be focused and linear to have a story.
Agree.
I also stayed in the parking lot the second time around, but staying in the house, squatting in the house, you have to get wire cutters from the convenience store, so you're going to have to rob it either way. That lets you cut the gate and get into the squatting house. Ralph is in there. Ralph is an android that speaks in the third person. He's very beaten and disheveled, obsessed with RA9, and we don't really know why. We think he might be a threat at first, but he reveals himself to be cool. He doesn't like humans. He's afraid of humans because his owner beat and disfigured him, burned him, cut him up. He's got scars and burn marks everywhere. That's where we're staying. We're staying with Ralph for now. And for this night, he doesn't really cause any trouble. We ask if we can stay, and he says yes. And that's where we're holing up for the night.
I really liked Ralph as a character because he did a very good job of making me as the player feel very uneasy. I didn't really know what the right thing was to do, and even though the game's trying to make me feel maternal towards Alice, I legitimately felt that way. I almost second thought going into the squad altogether, but I really liked his character, and I think this particular moment in the story was pretty nice. Even though you kind of have an interesting moment with Alice after you make her bed up of, I think, maybe something soft and a piece of cardboard. I can't remember, but she does ask Kara, are you going to be with me forever? Promise you're going to be with me forever. I can't remember the exact verbiage, but it's interesting the game even gives you the choice to say, yes, I promise we'll be together forever, or we won't be together forever, or I can't promise that. Because of exactly what you just got done saying, Rick, the game is written in such a way where the answer is always, I promise, regardless of what you choose, or at least that's how I felt.
Yeah, there's no reason we should be scarring this little child and saying, well, the future is uncertain. Actually, there's no proof of Santa Claus.
Yes, anytime the game gives me a choice to do something like that, I can't do it even if I want to.
Always let the kid believe in Santa. What's the harm?
Exactly.
Chapter 9 is From the Dead. This sees us as Marcus coming back from being shot. So after he was shot, he was kind of put into a junk heap of androids. And what's interesting here, there are two things that stand out to me in this chapter. One, there is a huge metaphor for rebirth throughout here. And two, there is a distinct horror flavor to this chapter that kind of shows up in some chapters down the line too. There's like, it's almost like they had some horror fans on the team and they wanted to give little nods, which, I mean, it's not scary, but it's definitely unsettling playing through this. What you're going to do is your legs are sort of torn off and you have to crawl around to get new legs, but your ocular sensor, your memory palace, mind palace thing isn't working, and your auditory function isn't working. So you have to go around this scrapyard to find all of these spare parts among all of these other destroyed, decrepit androids.
Yeah, the imagery here is very on the nose, but I think kind of in a good way. This is absolutely setting up Marcus's rebirth, and I rather enjoyed the aesthetics in this chapter, the quasi-horror, as you said. I also like that because certain things are physically damaged on Marcus, that actually impacts certain things with the gameplay. The ability to hold down, I think it's your R2 button on the controller to do kind of the Android detective mode thing. It doesn't function until you find the right part to repair it. And then another part, I think you mentioned, was his audio chip. He can't hear or hear well. So the sound in this particular moment is very distorted. It's very kind of like you're in a tunnel, basically. And once you do find that particular part and the audio is restored, it's crisp and clean again. You can hear the rain and the thunder and all that. And I like that as you slowly piece yourself together. You're quite literally adding gameplay elements back to your experience. And it's really well done, too.
It's not so bad, yeah. Marcus will continue to walk through this valley of death, through the electronic debris, dirt, and androids. piecing himself together. This is a literal rebirth metaphor. We are not only clawing our way out of hell, we are our personal hell, our hell of servitude. We are clawing our way out to be reborn, to be baptized in the rain. It is raining, of course. It's almost a literal baptism and rebirth scene. As you replace your parts, you also replace an eye, and the result is heterochromia, two different eye colors, which is a distinctly human trait, which is, it's further characterization that are these people? Are these androids people? I don't know. The Messiah metaphor gets way stronger later. So I don't know that I necessarily feel too negatively about this one. It's kind of a drag to go through on subsequent playthroughs, but it's not so bad. I don't think it's so heavy-handed to be obnoxious. Speaking of upcoming chapters, this is the first time we hear about a place called Jericho, and it is a place where they can be safe. One of the dying androids that is in pieces in here tells Marcus this in a sort of frenzied last breath. So Jericho is now on our radar.
Yeah, we'll be hearing a lot about Jericho in the subsequent chapters, so it's interesting how he's given that information. But it encompasses just how really this is a good chapter, kind of as you were starting to allude to as well. A couple things I wanted to mention before we move on, and I'll keep them quick. I don't know if you saw it. Depending on where you stand in the junkyard, you're able to do the press L1 to look at the thing prompt. And there's actually a very angelic statue that you can look up towards. Why it's in this junkyard makes no sense to me, but it's backlit by the moon, and it looks wonderful. But it just further presses the theme that the level's trying to go towards. I don't know if you caught that.
Oh, I did not. An angelic statue, you say?
Yes. Like, I can picture in my head where you can see it, but I can't describe it to you to save my life.
I did not see that. I mean, it furthers the rebirth and baptism metaphor, right? Marcus is in his own personal hell, and he is sort of representative of all androids in their own personal hell of servitude, right? Trying to break out and assert their independence, their free will, their qualia. And this is that for Marcus, quite literally, clawing our way out and being reborn in the rain. Complete, by the way, with music, with underscoring that I can only describe as epic, which is how they gave the directive to the composer for Marcus's music, epic. Definitely captured that here.
Yeah, 100%. It was very well done. One other thing I wanted to mention, too, before we move on, I don't know if you came across them or not, there are 2 androids in the junkyard that are still functioning, albeit very poorly. And you as the player are given the choice on whether or not you want to kill or spare them. There's one of them is a female, and she's kind of half buried in the dirt and debris, and she has the thermal regulator or the heart piece that you need. And you can go to take it, and she'll actually grab Marcus's hand and kind of plead with him, no, I want to live. I don't want to die. And then you're given the choice to kill her and take the part you need, or spare her and try to find it elsewhere. And it is elsewhere, so you don't have to kill her, which I thought was an interesting choice to make. But there's also another android crawling around on the ground somewhere, and I missed him the first time I played the game through. He's in such disrepair that he asks to be killed. He asks to be put out of his misery. And you have the choice whether or not you do it. You get nothing from it, but it gives you that choice. So now the game is starting to kind of set up the idea that you can either be someone merciful or someone maybe vengeful, or just do whatever it is that you need to do to get out of where you are so you can continue on whatever journey you decide for yourself. So I don't know if you came across them, but I thought it was interesting to pose the player with those choices at this point.
I did, yeah. It gives you the humanization aspect. Or to frame it in a revolutionary light that we'll see upcoming, do we protect the people at all cost, even if it means the struggle is greater, or do we accept necessary sacrifices for quicker justice?
There you go. Well said.
I do okay sometimes. We're on to Chapter 10. We're waiting for Hank. This is our first introduction to Connor's mind palace. So every so often, Connor will make a report to Cyberlife where he sort of stands there and meditates. This is never, clarified, but I interpret it as this is where Connor's going, into his mind palace. It's a Garden of Eden, essentially, where he is able to internally recluse himself to speak with this character named Amanda.
Hello, Amanda.
Connor, it's good to see you. Congratulations, Connor. Finding that deviant was far from easy. And the way you interrogated it was very clever. You've been remarkably efficient, Connor.
Thank you, Amanda.
She's a woman, a somewhat older woman, and from what we can tell, she is pro-cyberlife, and she really wants Connor to catch and deal with these deviants. I don't know. Let's talk about this here. I don't know that we need to bring this up every time it comes up, because it's largely the same shtick every time. Amanda wants to see Connor succeed in his mission. She does not want Connor to have empathy for deviants. She does not want Connor to, have struggles working with Hank. She just wants him to do his mission and help save cyberlife. And we find out more later, but that's sort of what happens every time. So what did you make of this Mind Palace?
Visually speaking, to start with, it is beautiful. It's one of those places where I could absolutely find peace myself if I were to ever come across something like that in real life. And I like the idea that this is how the game is kind of representing Connor making that internal report, if you will, and talking to his superiors, which it was actually kind of funny. In the very beginning, maybe the first couple minutes of dialogue between Connor and Amanda, I didn't actually put that together for some reason. I thought he was like literally somewhere else. Maybe CyberLife had this location within their headquarters or something like that. But I came to terms with it pretty quick, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I also like the dialogue between Connor and Amanda, because it's an interesting kind of tug and pull. Maybe not in this first scene, really, but in subsequent scenes. She really wants you to accomplish your mission, and she has no tolerance for any deviation away from that objective.
Yeah, she's very clearly your superior, I suppose it should be said.
Yes, exactly. And what I found myself doing a lot of times is I would say what I know she wanted to hear, whether I felt that way or not. And I couldn't tell if that was me just trying to appease my superior, because maybe me as Connor, I'm starting to already think as the player deviant thoughts, if you will. Or maybe I'm just saying what it is that she wants to hear because I am very steadfast in my mission. It's interesting. I find some instances where you as the player can make conflicting choices based on what you think the character should do, what you want to do, and then kind of what the story kind of wants you to do as well. I've got some examples upcoming, but this really started me down that path.
See, I told her what she wanted to hear because that is how I function in my day-to-day life with all of my superiors. That's what you got to do.
That's exactly right. If I had like one of those little telltale meters next to my boss, it would be a blue arrow all the time.
I'd be the best little gamer possible. So we break out of the Mind Palace. Connor is going to meet Hank at the police station, the swankiest and most expensive police station I have ever seen. Again, what is going on in Detroit that they have so much money? It is wild. But you wait for him to get in. Everybody jokes like, what time does Lieutenant Anderson get in? Depends on where he was the night before. We'll be lucky if we see him before noon, because he's an alcoholic. That's the gag. But you do. You wait for him. You get to, if you choose to, you can check out his desk and learn a little bit about him. He's a by-the-book capo type. He's a cop or a detective. He's a detective that was a wonderkind, and he lost his fire. And now he just drinks his night away, disheveled. He's terrible with technology. He's totally at odds with his boss because he goes by the beat of his own drum. Also, and this is not part of the archetype, he really likes heavy metal and jazz. Cool.
Yeah, it's almost a little too on the nose, that particular archetype, but I have to admit, I kind of like that, and I think that allowed Connor, you as the player, to play Connor as someone that could really be buddy-buddy with Hank, so I think it serves more of a narrative purpose than anything else, but I don't know. I also feel like I could actually go and hang out with Hank, too, so there's
totally. Totally, yeah. I like that archetype, too. It gets a little too close to home with music stuff, and we don't have the time to get into that. But I have a lot of affection for the very gifted or very hardworking talent through hard work sort of archetype that loses that fire due to personal issues or becoming disenchanted with what they once loved. I like that archetype a lot. I do.
Yeah, same here.
But speaking of Hank, he does come in and he speaks with his supervisor. The gist of it is this. Hank gets assigned to investigate the growing android problem. You know, there are homicides that are happening way more often, things of that nature, and a blowout ensues.
I've got 10 new cases involving androids on my desk every day. We've always had isolated incidents. Old ladies losing their android maids and that kind of crap. But now, we're getting reports of assaults and even homicide, like that guy last night. This isn't just CyberLife's problem anymore. It's now a criminal investigation, and we've got to deal with it before the shit hits the fan. I want you to investigate these cases and see if there's any link.
Why me? Why do I gotta be the one to deal with this shit? I am the least qualified cop in the country to handle this case. I know jack shit about androids, Jeffrey. I can barely change the settings on my own phone.
Everybody's overloaded. I think you're perfectly qualified for this type of investigation.
Bullshit! The truth is, nobody wants to investigate these fucking androids, and you left me holding the bag.
CyberLife sent over this android to help with the investigation. It's a state-of-the-art prototype. It'll act as your partner.
No fucking way! I don't need a partner, and certainly not this plastic prick!
Hank is feeling targeted because he doesn't like androids. I'm not sure where I'm going to insert the audio. Maybe it was just before this. Maybe it's right after. Who knows? But you'll hear some of that because it's well acted. I thought they did that very well. I love hearing Clancy Brown get very angry. He's got a great voice for that.
Yeah, that's the one thing I remember about this scene is just how good Clancy Brown's acting chops are here.
Yeah, he's great. But he is being assigned to the android cases whether he likes it or not, and he's none too thrilled. You go back and sit down with him at the desk, and you can make small talk if you want to about what transpired or about what you learned at his desk, about his love for basketball, music, his dog's name being Sumo. Or you can just not. You could go right down to business. What I appreciate about this, though, is everything that you learn, basketball, his job. He's got anti-android propaganda stickers all over his desk. If you just go down the list and ask him about each and every one, some of them will increase your relationship and some will decrease. So not that, ultimately these relationship meters don't matter all that much. So, that should be said. But if you're just being the gamer that goes down the dialogue tree, you're not necessarily going to be rewarded at every turn. I like that.
Same. I absolutely appreciated that too, because as soon as you unlock a new type of dialogue or a way to say something, the game signifies that by putting a little unlocked padlock next to the dialogue option. So my gamer brain is, I worked to earn this dialogue option, I should probably use it. And I liked how, because Hank is the type of character he is, he's very unstable and volatile sometimes. You don't really know what you're going to get. You think you're going to ask this question with the best of intentions, but somehow it either offends him or annoys him. And at that point, I learned you don't just go down the dialogue tree anymore. Try to think through what you're going to say, even though the dialogue options themselves can be quite vague and they don't always correspond to how you think in classic. But I think this is a BioWare-esque thing, or maybe it's a Quantic Dream thing. Either way, very vague.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's almost like we're sharing the same notes. Yes, this is very BioWare. The example that I wrote down here is, they'll give you button presses that correspond with understandable, harsh, direct, etc. I pushed understanding, and Connor basically said, "You've got to move past your personal issues, Lieutenant." And I was like, that ain't it, man. That's not what you say. That's not it. So yeah, very BioWare in that way. It got a laugh out of me. No matter what happens, I'm pretty sure Hank ends the scene mad at you. He gets a little aggressive physically with you. And you either end with Hank getting a lead or Hank getting no lead. I don't know how to get no lead. I get a lead every time. I'm just a great detective. How do you not get a lead from this?
The way that works is Alice and Kara need to be dead by this point in the game, because when you get a lead, it's about Alice and Kara. If they,
oh yes, right.
If you somehow get them killed, which I think the only way to do that is if you don't escape the house in the beginning with Todd, then I think the scene just transpires to Hank gets mad and then he says, I'm going to lunch. And then the scene ends.
That's right. Yeah. At this point, that's the only way Kara and Alice can die. And then you lose like a third of your game.
Yes.
Speaking of Kara and Alice, we're going back to them in Chapter 11 on the run. Again, this will largely depend on where you stayed the night before. But no matter where you stayed, Kara is going to change her appearance. She's still walking around in her CyberLife uniform. So what she's going to do is she's going to cut her hair. She's going to change her hair color, and she finds clothing, whether it's in a closet or in the trunk of the car. She puts on this like oversized kind of like military jacket sort of deal. She cuts her hair real short, and you get to choose blonde, black, or white. I always go white in hair situations that I can change. I think it looks cool.
Nice. I did white my first playthrough, but subsequent playthroughs, I don't know. I did black because I have black hair. I have no idea.
This also gets into androids and how Cage sees them, but I want to hold off on that because I know I have a comment later on about that. So I'll hold on to that for now. If you're staying with Ralph, there is a tense scene that happens here. And this is all before Connor and Hank show up, because as you just said, they do. That's the lead they get. But if you stayed in the shack, in the abandoned house with Ralph, when you wake up the next morning, Ralph has Alice at knife point, and he's dual wielding in his other hand a dead gopher of some sort. And he says he's going to feed us, quote, like a family.
Ralph found this to feed the little girl. It's good for her. A present. To make up for past misunderstandings. Ralph will cook. We will do just like humans do. Humans like burnt meat.
Succulent.
Succulent, you'll see. Succulent. Succulent.
Succulent. He's very fond of that word. Alice is understandably terrified as shit, I think is the medical term. I tried having Kara explain, like, Ralph, people don't eat that. That's not what people eat. And Ralph explodes, metaphorically, explodes. He says, yes, they do. Ralph knows this. Ralph went through a lot of trouble to get this. It's very tense. And you have an option here. You mentioned the padlocks signifying routes or options that you have. When you're changing in the shack, you actually put your gun down to put on the new jacket, and you can forget to pick it back up. If you pick it back up, though, you have the option to check your gun here. You don't have to pull it, but you can check it. What I did is I convinced Ralph, hey, a father would never threaten his daughter with a knife. Which, I'm not a parent, but I think I've got that part down pat.
There you go. You're set up for success.
I can think of fewer than 5 reasons I would threaten a child with a knife.
Only
and
5?
Most of them probably wouldn't happen. Let's get out of here before I get in trouble. Before the scene plays out, Connor comes a-knocking. Or I guess before we do that, any thoughts on Ralph? This is kind of the last we see of him.
Yeah, again, we kind of touched on it a little bit before, but I really, really like this character. I like how unstable he is because I felt very uncomfortable as the player, and it sounds weird to say, but I really like being put in these situations where I really have to try and think about what I want Kara or whomever to say, what I think they should say based on the character as they're presented to us. And I think for the most part, the game does really good about if you select options that are pretty applicable to a character, their personality, or their mental state at that point, that it kind of makes sense. There's not a lot of tonal whiplash there, at least not in my opinion. So this particular scene was really fun to kind of navigate through. I actually went the route more so of, oh yeah, Gopher, sounds wonderful, and kind of played into his fantasy for a little while until I think I reached the same point where I could decide to check and or pull the gun at that point, but he was a little bit more in agreeance with us and not nearly as on edge because we're about to shove Gopher in our faces. But it's still really fun, and I like Ralph as a character for that.
Yeah, his trauma is manifesting here. It's not just that he's some crazy wacky android. He's traumatized. Connor comes in next. What happens is Connor pulls up. We hear him coming. Kara and Alice hide, and Connor will come in and gets to investigate. And you can scan Ralph, and you see that he's got like 3rd-degree burns on his android skin. He's missing an eye, I think I forgot to mention. Tons of knife marks. It's very clear abuse from a previous owner. So his trauma is well-founded, 100%. This goes to another sort of mini game, though, where it's hot and cold. Your Ralph's stress level will rise as Connor gets closer to Kara and Alice's hiding spot. You don't even actually have to talk to Ralph. If you know where they are, you can just beeline it over there and end this like real quick. But you can interrogate him too. Once you find them, they're hiding like under the stairs. Ralph will kind of jump Connor from behind, giving them a time to run, a time to escape. And that's when Clancy Brown and I think another cop buddy comes in, and the pursuit begins. They chase Kara and Alice to a highway. Connor does. An automated highway, I suppose it should be said. These cars are autonomous, and they are traveling at speeds far greater than our highway. Think the Autobahn times 1.25 or something. Very, very fast. And this begins a chase sequence across the highway with Kara and Connor. Connor tries to go, and Hank will try and stop you. Hank says, don't do that, it's suicide. And depending on how you're playing, you can choose to ignore him or choose to go. If you're being a deviant, you choose to obey Hank, even though it goes against your mission. Otherwise, you can go across the highway. But either way here, you're going to have to do some QTEs at the very least with Kara and Alice, and they can die here. They can get hit by cars and die.
Yeah, this scene, and I think largely this entire chapter, is one of my favorites, maybe in the entire game, for a couple different reasons. Since we're on the highway section here, I mentioned this last episode, although I can't remember where specifically, but I absolutely adore the music that plays during this chase sequence, because this is, from what I recall, the first example that I can think of where Connor's music is very distinct, Kara's music is very distinct. They had 2 different composers that worked on the music together, but now these two are in this exciting, desperate scene together, and you can hear both of their themes kind of overlapping into each other. Connor's more cold and metallic sort of tones, along with the violins and the strings of Kara's as they're running across this highway. I don't know what it is about that score, but it absolutely elevates this chase scene for me. It's one of those ones where when it's on screen, as I was replaying the game through, like if my wife were in the room, she would absolutely stop and watch this particular scene for how well it was done. So I really like this chapter for that.
It's very exciting. This is the stuff Quantic Dream does well. Like, they do the action sequences, the movie scenes very well.
Oh yeah, big time. They absolutely nailed it here, and you have to commend them for it too. The other thing that I really like about this chapter, and it didn't really click with me until I played the game through a second or a third time, but and you might have mentioned it, but when you're here with Connor, you're also controlling Connor. So your control is being flipped back and forth between Kara and Connor. And then when you're on the highway, the QTEs kind of do the same thing. You hit the buttons, but you're also hitting the buttons for Kara and Alice. Then you hit the buttons for Connor so he can also cross the highway if you choose to have him go across the fence and defy Hank. What I found interesting here, though, is you're controlling these characters, but these characters both have conflicting objectives. Kara and Alice are trying to escape, and you as Connor, you're tasked to try to catch them. And I thought it was interesting because the more I thought about it in my second playthrough, I thought to myself, can I just let them escape as Connor? And you absolutely can if you want. If you want him to fail, you can decide not to find them, even if you know where they are, and that can change the story in that particular way. But I did find myself in my first playthrough just going through the quote-unquote motions and just doing what I was told, but I thought that was interesting. It's not really apparent that you can do this, but you can play these characters kind of off each other if you want them to mold into a single objective for the narrative that you want to try to paint for yourself. You don't get a ton of freedom that way, but I like that it's there, sort of.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's well said and well observed. You don't have to just play Connor either as either 100% got him or 100% didn't. You can be in the middle, which is what I did here. I'm kind of making my Connor this playthrough fully non-deviant but somewhat incompetent. So I had him chase them across the highway, but I had him purposefully die. I failed every QTE until Connor was killed on the highway. That really shakes Hank up, by the way. Hank does not like it when Connor dies and then comes back in a different body. It fucks him up.
Yeah, it fucks him up and it pisses him off to the nth degree as well.
Yes. Because he desperately needs a friend, Hank does. And like it or not, he's seeing Connor in that way. Hank is our tsundere little protagonist, and he needs a friend. He wants a friend. And seeing his friend essentially be a machine and reminded that there's no humanity there, Hank doesn't like it. If you play full non-deviant, full android, Hank will be hostile towards you. And we may see that fold out today in a very exciting scene emotionally exciting scene, I should say, that I think is very cool.
Yes.
But we don't see that quite yet. We're moving on to the next chapter, chapter 12. That's Jericho. This is a quickie. This is my least favorite chapter in the game, I think.
Yep, I would 100% agree with you.
This is just find the clues. You're playing as Marcus trying to find Jericho. You get these clues that you look at on your hand. They're sort of like Android telepathically put onto your hand. And you're just going around the city trying to find them. Between the camera angles and the forced perspective, this isn't much of a hunt. David Cage basically has you on a hallway throughout this whole area, despite it looking open, through cameras and through borders along the environment, whether artificial, like traffic jams or whatever, or invisible walls. You're on a hallway. He just suggests choice without giving it to you. This is weak narratively, 100%, but here it works because it keeps the story focused and it keeps the pacing focused. If this were just an open world, this chapter would be insufferable. But to Cage's credit, he doesn't do that. It doesn't work narratively whenever he puts you on a hallway like this, but here, absolutely, that was the right choice, 100%.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's exactly what I think of when I think back to this chapter. I'm so glad we weren't just flailing around the city trying to find these symbols on a wall. So to Cage's credit, 100% I agree with you there too. The other thing that's part of this chapter as well, we're introduced to a mechanic here where you as Marcus can actually pre-construct or pre-plan a way through an obstacle. Example, you jump on top of a roof of one of these buildings, a little lower rooftop, and you have to navigate over a gap, but it's too far for you to jump over. The game then kind of puts you in the hold the R2 button down Android detective mode sort of thing, and you're able to look around the environment and see spots where Marcus could potentially navigate around this obstacle. And there's only one right way to do it, so you're kind of trial and error trying to figure out how to go across this obstacle. And I like it for what it is. It's kind of cool to kind of put your shoes in the Android mindset to try to calculate the process for success, and then you execute on it. And it's kind of cool for that, but it's also kind of I felt like it was a time waster or padded runtime maybe, because then you construct your path, you press the square button to execute, and then you watch Marcus do the thing you just constructed in almost the same camera angles. It was fine, but I don't know. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought was hearing you say roof, and your Pennsylvania is showing.
Sorry, I'll cover that up.
That's okay. Anytime I say the word house, I have to think about how to pronounce it, because God forbid if you let a has slip through. You never know what can happen. No, I think this is fine. I'm going to hold off my thoughts on the pre-constructed routes business until the next chapter, because it ties into the pin I put in earlier. One of the unfortunate things is it takes out all the exciting platforming. So you just watch it happen instead of actually doing it.
Yes.
Which, I get it. It probably would have taken a significant amount of mocap and editing. I get it. But, I'm just saying it would have been more exciting to do it. But we find Jericho, though. It is a huge abandoned freight ship.
So that reveal, once he goes through the hallway and you see this giant freighter with the word Jericho slapped on the side, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. Although, once you actually get into Jericho, into the ship, it makes a little bit more sense. And we get a little bit more symbolism too as Marcus finds a way to get himself into Jericho, which is a route I, as a human, would never take. So why I felt the need to plunge into the ship the way that he does is beyond me.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like a baptism and rebirth motif continuation. It's very quick, like they don't linger on it, but he plunges into the water in slow-mo with angelic music playing. It's just a direct continuation to show that he's being reborn again, and highlighting him as a sort of savior. We get more of the horror DNA in here too when we're going through the ship's darkened halls. There's even a jump scare of one of our future compatriots running across the hallway just ahead of us with like an auditory sound effect. It's a jump scare in this game. I was not expecting that.
I wasn't either, so it got me pretty good, but it was one of those where it got me and I smiled because it got me. But it was really cool to navigate the hallways. I think you even come up to some doors where you can try to open them. I don't think any of them open, so you are still streamlined from a point A to point B as far as I know, but I did like knowing that there's something here now. So again, whoever was on the team that had the love for horror, thank you for putting it in this game because it definitely made me happy.
It's a little creepy for sure. The chapter ends with you meeting a bunch of androids, a bunch of rogue androids that welcome you to Jericho, and then we fade to black. We're moving into chapter 13, The Nest. The end of this chapter is where I'm going to unpull that pin, by the way.
Okay.
This is back with Connor and Hank. You're at a local food stand, getting some lunch. There are little buddy building moments here. If you didn't cross the highway, you can ask Hank, why didn't you let me cross the highway? And Hank will say, because you could have been killed. And also, I don't like filing paperwork for damaged equipment. So little things like that. You get a little more insight into Hank. You can do like an R2 scan and see that the vendor is doing like illegal activities on the side or something, or maybe you overhear it. I don't quite remember, but you tell him like, hey, your buddy's doing illegal activities. And Hank will say, people do what they have to get by. He's that grizzled cop that has lost his fire,
Which I actually found this both interesting and confusing at the same time. And what I mean by that is, I like that you can scan all these things and gain some insights. Like, you go up to the food truck, and I can't remember the name of the character, but he's interacting with a character that's trying to sell him a gambling lead, I think on a sports game, maybe. And then, And then, the food truck vendor, I think his actual license to serve or his food license is, like, long since expired and stuff like that, too. But, like, based on the chapter where you're at the police station and you're going down through the dialogue tree and you find out that not everything's going to get a positive reaction, I thought to myself, if I tell Hank that, hey, your friends are involved in illegal activities, my thought was, I'm just going to piss him off. So I never really went down that route. But those particular dialogue options actually endear Hank to Connor a little more because he says what he says. Just do what they do to get by. They don't bother anybody. They don't bother me. And that confused me. Like, why would that make him happy? But I'm complaining for complaining's sake, I think. I still like the interactions, though.
This is where Connor explains deviancy to Hank. Deviancy is a fault in androids' programming that makes them emulate human emotions. It is fundamentally an error in computation. They think they are feeling emotions, but it's all simulated. This goes, again, they don't actually explore this, but this goes back to that idea of phenomenal consciousness. What is it? And how do we pinpoint it and say this is what it is? These, as far as Connor and Cyberlife are concerned, are just simulations, a perfect simulacra of what a human would say or feel or do. But they're not human. That's deviancy. In a stellar display of grab-it-off-the-shelf writing, Cage elects to make Hank, the grizzled, techno-illiterate gruff cop, say,
"We believe that a mutation occurs in the software of some androids, which can lead to them emulating a human emotion."
In English, please.
And then follow up later with, Emotions ruin everything. Androids aren't so different from us as we thought. And like, that's really just grabbing it off the shelf. It's on sale. Throw it in the cart.
Yeah, exactly. This was very abrupt for me. Like, okay, I can buy the whole techno-illiterate type of way of going about writing, sure, but I don't remember what Connor was saying exactly in this moment to prompt this response, but it was not techno-babble in any way, shape, or form. I think he just said it to say it, which,
and
fine.
This came out in 2018, and like, you know, it would have been a little more accepted then. It was written before that, so like, you know, the whole in English please and I'm tech illiterate, like that wasn't as snuffed out as it is now. When people say that now, it usually triggers eye rolls and like, all right, man, come on now. It's 2025. Get with the program, Grandpa.
Yeah, no kidding. What also kind of threw me a little bit too was Hank all of a sudden seems to start empathizing towards androids when he's been so adamantly opposed to them. I don't know, that just seemed kind of abrupt for me. And I know you can treat Hank with respect and try to be buddy-buddy with him up to this point, but I don't know, it just... Yeah, this writing in this moment, albeit I don't think it was terrible, it just felt, I don't know, off is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. I don't remember feeling like this was abrupt. But also, you know, it's interesting whenever you're going back and revisiting a piece of media that you've lived with for a while. Like, you know, this is my second time playing it for this show, but I've played it no less than 4 times in the past. So I think at this point, my view is sort of distorted in that I know their relationship and I like their relationship. So maybe I didn't see that. And I'm not saying this to be like, I've played this more than you. I'm not like, I don't mean it that way. But it's like, do you know what I mean? Whenever you revisit something you know very deeply, or at least know better than a surface level, it's hard to put yourself in a perspective to form those initial reactions once more. So I don't know. I don't remember thinking this was abrupt. I wouldn't put it past it. Maybe it is if I were to pull it up right now and watch it. That wouldn't make for good audio content. But if I did, you know, maybe it would be. I don't know. I like seeing Hank humanized, though. So maybe I'm giving it a pass solely for that.
No, I think I agree with you as you talk it out that way. I also find myself being a little bit more critical of this game than I think I was originally anticipating. And I think that mostly comes out of I really do like this game at its core, and I want it to do well, and I wish it would have done better in certain areas, but I'm getting way ahead of myself.
This chapter continues. The two of them go to do another android investigation. So there is another apartment that's been emptied. A homicide was called in, and it's another investigation just like with Carlos Ortiz. It's clear that it's an android. RA9 is written obsessively. There are no fingerprints. This apartment, though, is completely infested with pigeons, just everywhere, and the Deviant was taking care of them. As we piece it together, eventually you figure out that the Deviant is still here. He falls through the ceiling where he was hiding, and another chase sequence begins. Again, this is visually exciting, really visually exciting. Interestingly, during this chase, you have options to take the slow but safe route or the fast but risky route, and functionally you get there all the same. As long as you don't fail the QTEs, you're going to get there no matter what route you take.
Yeah, that's disappointing, but at the same time, I give this a pass only because I am so enamored with how well this scene is put together. I think if I were to rank all of the chapters in the game, this one, if not my favorite, is very close to my favorite, just because I love how well this is put together. I love how you get a chance to hold the R2 button down for maybe 2 or 3 seconds to decide where you want to go, and you have to make that choice. The QTEs feel nice and natural here. The music is incredible. It's giving you that adrenaline rush and that classic Connor style that you're used to hearing now. And visually, it's wonderful. Like, it always fills me with adrenaline. I absolutely love this scene. I wish there was more like it. And it actually almost felt like I was playing an actual video game having to actually do stuff instead of just making dialogue choices.
Yeah, you've got to think on your feet. It's very exciting. It gets the blood pumping. At a certain point, you're going to reach a rooftop where Hank confronts the deviant as he's running, and Hank gets pushed sort of off of the edge, and he's holding on to the edge of this building. He's about to fall, and Connor has a pivotal choice to make. You can save Hank, who it shows has an 85% chance of survival. And anytime I say that statistic, 85%, I think of that Scott Steiner infamous wrestling tirade, 85% chance at beat me at sacrifice.
See, normally if you go one-on-one with another wrestler, you got a 50-50 chance of winning. But I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. So you got a 25% at best at beating me. And then you add Kurt Angle to the mix, your chances of winning drastically go down.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, nice pull.
I love it, dude. I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal.
The numbers don't lie.
If someone were to put Scott Steiner on the bingo card for this podcast, I would not have gotten that space.
Oh, you never know what's going to happen. So you can do that, or you can choose to pursue the deviant. Now, of course, if you are playing the way that I think Cage hopes you do, you're going to make Connor sympathetic to humans, and you're going to save Hank. And if this happens, Hank kind of thanks you, like in his own way, he thanks you, but your software instability goes up. You do not catch the deviant. Now, you can also choose to leave Hank and catch the deviant. And if that happens, you'll get him. The deviant will be like, whose name is Rupert, by the way. He'll be like, why are you doing this? Why are you helping the humans? He outright calls Connor a slave.
Why are you doing this?
All right.
You're one of us.
Shut up.
You're helping humans, but you're just their slave.
I said shut up!
Hank will catch up to you, completely out of breath. He puts the android in cuffs and then bitch slaps Connor in the face. He's not happy that you left him to die. He says,
You bastard! You saw he was gonna fall and you'd rather let me die than fail your fucking mission!
I had to make a choice. It seemed to me...
What am I to you? A statistic? A 0, a 1 in your fucking program? Huh? Is that how you see humans, you bastard? Jesus.
I understand you're upset. Perhaps I didn't assess the
Fuck
situation.
you and your fucking assessment!
he's rightfully pissed because, again, all he needs is a friend. But, he doesn't perceive Connor as seeing him as anything more than a statistic.
Yeah, I feel very bad for Hank whenever I do make the choice to be able to see this scene. But I have to say, this is another example of some stellar acting on Clancy Brown's part, and Brian DeChart does a wonderful job as Connor. And what I love about this is when Connor gets smacked across the mouth, the way he flies back, but then in a very android-esque way snaps back to attention to take Hank's verbal abuse. Like, I like how this scene is acted out. It's very well done, but I do feel terrible for Hank because, like you said, we're giving him more reasons to just saddle up with the demons he's been trying to fight this entire game.
Oh, speaking of the snapping back, I want to unpull those pins. So the flowchart, by the way, whenever you apprehend the deviant as you're going to leave, the deviant says, RA9, save me, and he jumps off the building, which the flowchart labels as a suicide. This narrative is inconsistent with how it views androids. It doesn't know whether it wants to portray them as being human or not human, equal to humans, lesser than humans, or better than humans, which is what I think is the interesting conversation. It depends on what Cage wants to convey emotionally and how he wants to manipulate the plot. Sometimes androids are superior to humans. Marcus can pre-construct these pathways. Kara can flawlessly cut her own hair and change color immediately. Kara has 9,000 children's stories committed to memory. That's an upcoming scene. But sometimes they're characterized as being similar or less than humans. There's an upcoming scene where Connor gets sucker punched by a human and he gets the wind knocked out of him. If you fail the QTEs, you can just get wrecked by cars or wrecked by Todd, a schlubby human. And there are some plot hole things that I don't want to get into because of spoilers. But David Cage and Williams are never sure what their stance on this is. How interesting would this game be if the thesis was humans or androids are superior to humans, how can we ethically live with them and alongside of them? How interesting that would be, but they don't do that. They instead just use whatever is convenient at the time. That's something that I noticed this second playthrough around. It didn't bug me as much the first time, but this time around, after listening to a bunch of interviews with Nick Bostrom, especially, simulation hypothesis and an AI researcher, it's been in my mind a lot. And, am I saying that I could do this story better? No, but I'm not the one that made it. I'm not the one that put it out for the world to view. And while I'm not saying that, like, this is getting into the role of the critics episode that we have coming up, while I'm not saying that, like, we should all be nitpicking across every single thing that we come across with a magnifying glass, this really stuck out to me as being thematically and ideologically inconsistent. I don't know. Did you notice this, or do you think that I'm just sort of rambling here?
No, I think you're practically spot on. It's something I didn't really notice until subsequent playthroughs, and when I think back to the very first time I played this game, I think I started to subconsciously just identify androids as other humans, and I just left it at that, because there's so many different mannerisms and things that they do that are so human-esque. And I understand that they, like you spelled out, how Kara and Marcus have very clearly demonstrated their technological superiority and things like that over humans. But I'm glad you brought up Connor getting punched in the stomach. Like, that he reacts to that in such a human way that I think it was that moment forward where my brain just shut off, and just I rarely looked at an android as an android or anything else unless I visibly saw their LED on screen, and even then I kind of let that fly. But yeah, it wasn't until later playthroughs that I started to see what it is you're calling out. I actually missed the fact that the flowchart labeled this as a suicide. And I'd like to think if I saw that, I'd have probably gone down the same thought train that you went down as well, because there was a point I do remember thinking to myself, what am I supposed to think here? So I just decided I'm going to think what I feel like I want to think, and I'm just playing a game with a bunch of humans at this point.
Which is, I think, what they want you to, how they want you to perceive it.
Yes.
But that's something that I wanted to call out here. There are going to be more instances of that coming up, and totally unrelated to deviancy too. There shouldn't be any reason they should be physically weaker because of deviancy. That doesn't track. I don't know. That's something we'll see more of. But moving forward, we've got chapter 14 now. 14 already. We're moving through it. Time to decide. This is picking up where we left off with Marcus. We meet the crew of Jericho. Specifically, we meet 3 of their leaders that become important: Josh, Simon, and North. Jericho, that freight ship, is a refuge where androids go when they don't want to be slaves anymore. That is a quote. This is where the Underground Railroad and slaves, those illusions, come way, way, way into play. It's not great. I don't think it's great. I think it's bad.
Yeah, I didn't really find myself gravitating towards the story that they were trying to tell with the different interactions that Marcus has with Josh, Simon, North, and even some of the other androids that you can interact with once you regain control. Like, I don't even know if the phrase heavy-handed is right here. It felt... I get it. I understand the relation that Cage is trying to make. I get it, but I think it's been beaten to death at this point. I would have loved to have heard other stories as to why some of the androids are in Jericho. It doesn't always have to be this slave route. Like, example, I would have loved if there was an android somewhere in Jericho that had a very similar relationship with a human as Marcus and Carl did. I became deviant because I had someone support me so well that they encouraged me to make my own choices or help me realize that I was more than just someone that's going to wash dishes and do the laundry kind of thing. And my deviancy came from that or something along those lines. I don't know if it would really make sense in the story that the writers were really trying to tell here, but anytime I talk to an android, I'm like, please tell me a different story. And it was just a similar variation on the same. And I wasn't too keen on that.
Yeah, that really slots into the master-slave dynamic that I think they're unfortunately going for. Having too many androids like Marcus's situation would kind of ruin that metaphor, and I don't know, it would sully the archetype and the skeleton that they were trying to use with these characters. It's unfortunate, but that's the choice they made. This is, speaking of Marcus, this is also where you get to begin to shape his ideology. Is he a pacifist or is he an aggressor? Each of those three, Simon, Josh, and North, kind of have different ideas on that as well. Like Josh, total pacifist, we don't want violence. North, total opposite. North wants to burn it all down. If there's casualties, hey, shit happens. Simon's kind of in the middle. More often than not, Simon just says, what should we do? And it's like, okay, buddy, we're glad that you're here. Jericho, though, they've been here for at least 4.5 weeks. Nobody, here's again, back to are androids superior, less than, what are they? Nobody knows who discovered this place anymore. It's been lost to time, which that sure is a convenient gap in their memory. Whatever. Many of the androids here are wounded. There's about 19, 20 of them. And like you said, Nomad, it's all implied to be by their former human masters, we learn. They are trying to salvage blue blood and biocomponents from those that die, but they don't have enough resources to keep everybody else alive. The death rate is outrunning the additions to the colony, and if they don't get more stuff, they're going to die. We see some androids here that are afraid to die, and they explicitly kind of say that sentiment. That's never explored. I wrote out a whole paragraph here. I think we've kind of already talked about that at length. It's just, we're not exploring all of the really interesting questions. Why is an android afraid to die? What is their concept of mortality? What do they believe happens after death? We don't know because we never talk about it. We're just supposed to implant ourselves onto them because they're human, right?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Lucy is the last main character we meet here before Marcus and company decide to go and storm Cyberlife for biocomponents. Lucy is a sort of soothsayer oracle character. As she heals Marcus's wounds, cauterizes the wounds to stop the bleeding. Absolutely no pain. Connor gets sucker punched and he's winded, but Marcus is getting actively cauterized and he's not even blinking. She connects Marcus via their android hand meld thing. She connects to him and gives him some lines, feeds him some lines that, if I'm being pessimistic, exist to highlight the quote, player is the storyteller angle. Darkness and light exist within you, Marcus, and remember, your choices shape our destiny. Let's see if I can put some in here.
You had it all, and you lost it all. You've seen hell, and now hell lives in you. Your heart is troubled. A part of shadow and a part of light. Which will prevail? Your choices will shape our destiny.
Stuff like that. I don't know. Am I being pessimistic by saying that that's a little bit too much?
No, I don't think so. It was very obvious to me, the way that Lucy was talking to Marcus, that I as the player knew that I had to make a very distinct choice going forward in the game to either be pacifistic or be violent. And it kind of took me out of the immersion a little bit, if I'm being honest. I really couldn't figure out what Lucy was supposed to really represent. Her visual presentation is very stunning, in my opinion. She's a woman and her eyes are completely blacked out. The backside of her head is completely missing, so all you see is wires. And she presents herself in sort of an ethereal kind of way, like you said, an oracle, I think is the word that I was thinking of when I first saw her. And she's very captivating in that way, but at the end of the day, I think all she serves is she just tells the player, you're going to have to make a choice as you continue to play this video game. And that brought me out of the immersion just a little bit, but she served her purpose well enough. So that's kind of where I'm at with Lucy.
We get enough of that from everybody else and from Chloe on the start screen. It's just, I don't know why they included Lucy. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree.
But they decide to storm Cyberlife because they need to take matters into their own hands if they want to survive. And that's where this chapter ends. We're moving on back with Alice and Kara for a chapter titled Zlatko. Zlatko is going to be a character that we're about to meet from a tip that Kara received from an android on the street. We arrive at Zlatko's mansion. He's a bigger dude with a beard and long slicked back hair, chest hair popping out of the shirt. It's great. And he's got an android named Luther, a very large and imposing android. Playing back into that, feels a little weird to say, but playing back into that master-slave dynamic, Zlatko is a white dude, Luther is a black dude. It's just, it's hard not to notice it, is all I'm saying.
Yes, agreed.
They take in refugee deviants to help them. And he tells Kara that we can get you to Canada. They don't have anti-android laws there. We'll get you to Canada. Alice protests. She says, I have a bad feeling about this. This is bad. And Kara says, this is our best hope. So we're going to get Kara's tracking chip removed and get on our way to Canada. So we go to Zlatko's basement. And this is where David Cage does David Cage things. Zlatko hooks you up to this machine. And he says it's going to be unpleasant. It binds you by the wrists and by the ankles, as well as by the back of the neck. It's the David Cage special. It's like a fetish. Every game of his has the female lead bound and sometimes gagged by a menacing male figure. Oftentimes in ways that could turn sexually violent. This isn't that, but this happens in every game of his, every single one. He's putting his fetish out there for everyone to see.
Interesting. I've yet to play any of the other games, so this is new to me. I didn't realize this was a thing, but I guess there's that to look forward to. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's two in Heavy Rain. There's at least one where you're bound to a table. And I think there is an implied sexual assault attempt at another point in Heavy Rain. It's been a while since I've played that one. I think 2013 was the last time I played it.
Oof, made my back hurt just thinking that far back.
But while you're bound up here, Zlatko lays it all on the table. He says, deviants aren't actually all that hard to track. Their tracking chips just stop working. I don't know how Kara didn't know this, by the way. Whatever. And he says, that's why they're hard to track down. I misspoke earlier. I don't know if I'll keep that in. Zlatko is going to wipe your memory, and he's going to do what he does with all the deviants that come in. He's either going to sell you back to, wiped, totally refreshed, and sell you for profit, or he'll just keep you and do experiments on you because I guess he's a comic book villain. One of the two. You fool, you buffoon. I can't believe you believed him. Alice, who is, obviously upset, trying to fight back, gets taken away by Zlatko. And before Luther leaves, he walks up to you, and this is all POV from Kara's view. That's another thing with this trend with David Cage when he does this. It's always POV of the woman. And Luther walks up and whispers, "Meet me in the living room." Zlatko, as much as I'm kind of shitting on David Cage here, Zlatko does have a really cool line here. He says, quote, "That's what you get for having a dream. They always end up the same. Tears and disillusionment. Believe me, you're better off being erased and feeling nothing. No more pain, no more hopes dashed. I almost envy you." The way he says this, I was like, oh man, are we going to learn more about Zlatko's background? No. But he says something so profound and so interesting. We're going to learn why this wackadoo is the way he is. He's a broken human, but no, what a great line, delivered very well. And we don't get anything after it.
Yeah, this is a prime example of one of these moments in this game where I observe it and I just feel tinges of disappointment. Because in that moment, for the very first time I played this game, that's exactly what I was hoping for. I wanted to understand why he's doing what he's doing. I want to understand why he feels the need to experiment on androids or anything like that. And granted, it could even be just basic reasons to kind of coincide with the comic book villain trope at this point, but you can't say something like that and just leave it on the table. Like, it was so disappointing.
Yeah, total missed opportunity. But from here, there are a few ways this can go. First of all, Kara's got to get out of there. She's got to stop the reset process. The way you do this is by like knocking over some vodka and causing a short circuit. I think you can actually let this complete if you just sit there and then like your new objective is to find Master, meaning Zlatko.
Yes.
And you don't recognize Alice. I've never done that.
It's funny. My very first playthrough, looking back, I don't know how I failed to free her because it is pretty simple once you look around and see the right things, but I had time run out on me because I didn't really know what to do. So once that happens, the machine sets you down and your little objective just says meet Luther in the living room or obey Master or something along those lines, or a combination thereof. And you go meet Luther in the living room. There's a tray of food, and it's supposed to be Zlatko's dinner, but if you actually look at it, it's like a bag of chips, a granola bar, a bagel, just some random stuff, and you will take it up to Zlatko on the second floor, and it's a room I don't think you have access to if Kara has her memories back, if you escape the machine successfully. Don't quote me, but I think that's true. But you'll walk in, and he'll ask you to put the tray down on a table, and you see him just ripping into an android on the table, and there's android pieces and parts all over the room. It's clearly like his experiment lair or what have you. So he tells you, okay, put it down, thanks, go away, in no uncertain terms. And he calls out to Luther, which he'll actually do whether or not you have your memory or not here, and he'll say, hey, bring me the little girl. I'm going to be finished doing what I'm doing in about 10 minutes. So now the game gives you a timer to find Alice before that 10 minutes expires. And if you don't, the game for Kara will actually end. But in my case where I didn't have my memory was wiped, Kara goes into the next room, and then a thought prompt comes up on screen, who is the little girl? And then your objective is remember. So you have 10 minutes to regain your memories and find Alice, and then make your way out of here. And the way to regain your memory is you have to go around the house and find certain things to kind of jog your memory. Like, example, your coats are taken by Luther before you come in, or before they take it down to the basement. Find your coats, interact with them. That'll trigger a flash of a memory. Kara will start to remember. And you find all these little objects and things around the house. If you find enough, you regain your memory, regain control of Kara in that sense, and now your objective is to go find Alice, and then you can continue on. I don't think you've played through this part, so really the only thing I'll leave us with here is I was very disenchanted with this idea. Like, how is it that a machine can completely wipe your memory free, but you can then go around and find little objects around the environment and then restore your memory somehow? It goes right back to is this a machine I'm playing as? Is it a human? What is going on? But I will say, from a gameplay standpoint, I did appreciate the fact the game allowed me to regain control because I messed up that QuickTime event so badly, so there is that.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that last remark. I think it comes down to giving the players a failsafe, because like you said, you can lose here. You can get Kara and Alice both killed, but you really have to try. They give you many opportunities to get out of here, and you have to like intently fail them. As you're going through here, whether you regain your memories or whether you stop the reset process, you've got to get out. You find Alice. There are some obstacles around here. There's a few different ways this can go down. You can interact with some of Zlatko's experiments. He's got like a polar bear android that's got half of its face missing. You can just unlock its cage. Cool. All right. Nothing bad will happen there.
I love that prompt just because I opened it because it allowed me to open it. Sure, why not? Video game. Yeah. I'm sure it serves a purpose.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, what is it going to do? Maul me to death? Quote from man who just recently was mauled. You can also, though, there's an android in a bathtub that it makes a big old racket if it sees you. It starts screaming, who are you? You're not obeying the master. You must obey the master. I'm alerting the master. And it'll start screaming and alert Zlatko to come to you. So you have to kill it if you don't want that to happen. But you can also find some of the other experiments in the basement too, and you can unlock their cages. Now they're like disfigured zombies, kind of. That's how they're portrayed. Really disfigured, grueling facial features, limbs hacked off and reattached. His experiments, and you can undo their cage lock and then just run away. They'll come back later if you do that. Otherwise, you've got to evade Zlatko. You can set the house on fire, which is something I just learned this past playthrough.
Really? I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. As you're running away, you can grab a poker from the fire or some timber from the fire and just set the house ablaze. And that's just another thing to contend with as you're running away. There will be some quick time events to evade Zlatko shooting at you with a shotgun, which is always fun. There's some stealthy stuff you have to do to avoid Luther's gaze. I had another little derpy moment here where I don't know, I guess the button didn't register, so I just walked out of a hiding spot, and that kind of accelerated the chase to the very end. Whatever, that's cool. You got to run out the back door. You can see that the back door is unlocked earlier, but if not, you have to choose that or the front door. Front door is locked. You go out of the back, you escape, and Luther and Zlatko will catch up to you. And this is where Luther, who turned deviant because of plot reasons, stops Zlatko from shooting you. He stands in front. Zlatko says, "Get out of the way." He says, "No, I won't let you hurt them." And he takes the shotgun away from him. Now, if you unlocked the experiment's doors, the, what do you call it? The zombie androids. If you unlocked that door, they will come out as a mob and just sort of beat Zlatko to death as he's yelling, "I am your master."
Get away from me! Get away from me! Obey me! I'm your master! I'm your master!
Which, again, comic book villain, right?
Yeah, given how we know Zlatko up to this point, this is the perfect end for him and always puts a smile on my face, because why not?
The alternative, if you didn't do that, is Luther just shoots him point blank with a shotgun, and he stays remarkably intact and in place if that happens. That is I'm not a gun nut, but if you get blasted point blank with a shotgun, you're not going to be intact, and you certainly won't be standing in the same spot. Those two things they're not going to happen.
Yes, that is science.
So Luther will then offer to help you if you can forgive him for doing as Zlatko programmed him. And obviously we do. Luther is a very kind man. He's a gentle giant. He says,
"I didn't want to hurt you. He programmed me to obey him. When I saw the little one risk her life to save you, it was like opening my eyes for the first time. Finally, I could see. I know you have no reason to trust me after what I did. But I know someone who could help you across the border. I could take you there. I could protect you. You and the little one."
So we're seeing that pattern for deviancy being established. A sudden urge in humanity born from witnessing true injustice. This becomes important later because they abandon this. Unfortunately abandon this because up till now they've set this up such that, that's why deviancy happens. There's some sort of injustice and you have a sudden urge of empathy, whether towards others or for yourself, whatever. They kind of do away with that later, and it's a real bummer. But up until now, it's been fine. It's been good.
Yeah, I noticed at this point, too, this is where this particular thread gets left behind, and it is very disappointing. But either way, I really do like the addition to Luther to the party. The game actually doesn't give you a choice to allow him to come along. He's kind of forced along. But either way, I really like his inclusion with this now trio. So it's going to be cool seeing what happens to Luther as things go forward. So he's a welcome addition. I like him.
Oh yeah, I do too. It's creating that sort of family dynamic between the three of you, mother, father, child.
Yes.
Pretty explicitly. He's great. This next chapter, Russian Roulette, is a shorty. We're in Connor's Mind Palace again, but after that, like we said, that kind of plays out the same way each time. Afterwards, you go to Hank's house, and he's passed out drunk on the floor with a gun in one hand and a bottle of Black Lamb scotch in the other. You can see this through the window. You're looking into the window through the house. You have to break in to get there. When you do that, you kind of slap him to wake him up. You realize he's passed out drunk. And, you get some really primo, drunk Clancy Brown lines throughout all of this. It is very good.
I'm going to sober you up for your own safety. I have to warn you.
Leave me
This may be
alone,
unpleasant.
fucking android. Get the fuck out of my house.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant, but I need you.
Yeah, this is another one of my favorites too, just because of this dynamic. Again, Clancy Brown can be drunk, he can be sober, he can be in distress, whatever it may be. Top-notch voice acting all the time. This was such a fun chapter.
Yeah, he's so great. This is like the closest it gets to laugh out loud funny. Because this is a movie, you sober Hank up the same way all movies do. You throw him in the shower. To which he says, I must be the only cop in the world to have his android break into his own home. And I'm thinking he must be the only cop on the force to be constantly badgered to look into every single case that's coming up. Just lots of great Clancy Brown dialogue in here. And while Hank is sobering up and puking, you get to look around the house. Hank will eventually, he agrees to come. You can either just kind of drop it, or you can kind of tease him and you can be like, I guess we aren't going to the sex club to investigate. And Hank's like, actually, I think I'm okay to go. So you pick out some new clothes for him, and then you get to like look around as he's puking. You can see his records, what he likes. You can look at the revolver, and he was playing Russian roulette. Like, that's what he does. He gets drunk and plays Russian roulette. This is like beyond suicidal ideation. Like, he's actively trying to die. Which he's got a great line later where he says he kills himself a little each day because he's a little too scared to pull the trigger. We'll get there. It's very good. You can ask him about that or not. You can see his dog. Sumo will be there. I didn't learn his name purposefully this past playthrough, thinking that he might attack me when I broke in here, but no, he didn't.
Yeah, even if you don't know Sumo's name, he's still riled up, so... But there is a difference on the flow chart, so for those completionists out there, you'll either have to learn his name or not in 2 separate playthroughs.
There's another name you can learn here, too. The name of Hank's late son. Hank's son died as a child. His name was Cole. I purposefully did not learn Cole's name this time around for a reason that will not become clear until the very end of the game, but I think it's important. So we'll get there, but you can learn that here. I don't quite remember. How did this gets outlined in that very same scene later on down the road, but I can't remember. How did Cole die? It was on the operating table because an android did the job because the doctor was like not available or something.
Yeah, if I remember the whole story, there was a traffic accident. Cole needed surgery. The doctor that was going to do the surgery or should have done the surgery was unavailable for... I'll save the reason why until the end. And an android had to do the surgery. That was the only thing available. And it doesn't explicitly say why, but Cole didn't make it through the surgery.
Yeah, it could have just been surgical complications that happen with the best doctors in the world, right? I mean, that stuff just happens. Humans are a fragile machine, to quote Carl.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's important to know. We'll get into the why later. Like, I have it written in the notes. It would just be a lot of scrolling to get down there and find it. But that's important. We'll come back to that soon. But for now, we're back with Marcus and gang. Chapter 17, Spare Parts. We're breaking into Cyberlife. They're making a lot of noise breaking into here, and I don't know how more guards are not seeing them. But they opt not to do stealth. You're just running around the drones, doing some parkour. You follow north, do some button presses. Cool. You eventually get caught as you're walking around this warehouse by a security android and the human worker who just happens to be looking for him. So you can either attack the human worker or kind of pull the security android in to, become your compatriot. You can hold him and you can be like, please join us. Now, if you do that, if you kind of hide from the human, put your hand over the security android's mouth, once the human's gone, you let him go. This is where it's revealed where Marcus has the ability to cause deviancy with one touch. He has become that level of Messiah. He can trigger deviancy with a touch of the hand. All I have written here is, this is ridiculous. I'm going to be honest, I remember thinking this whenever I played the game way back when, in 2018. There is a scene later where this gets even more egregious, but, we'll get there. This causing deviancy with such a perfunctory action, this is what I mean. Like, they set up this pattern where deviancy is caused by extreme human feeling. This human urge to see injustice and have something inside you just snap and say, I can't take it anymore. I need to push back. Here, it's being waved away for plot reasons because Marcus is God and he can just do that. And that, man, this is maybe my least favorite thing that this game does. I could forgive a lot of stuff in here. Like I said, this is like a guilty pleasure genre for me, but this is too far. This really bums me out, like as a writer, story, whatever. This sucks.
Yeah, my first playthrough when I saw this happen, I think I just consciously dismissed it as, I'm just going to go along for the ride at this point and try to understand the story that the writers are trying to tell. Because I thought something very similar. I was very vested in the idea of how deviance is caused. And even though a lot of the emotional trauma is coming from a human abuse, either way, taking that aside, I really wish they would have kept up with that angle. Now it's completely just been thrown away, it seems like, at least in most cases. And what I always felt to be a little jarring as well is when Marcus does awaken these androids, I feel like deviancy up to this point, like when Kara and even Marcus himself experience breaking into deviancy, there's kind of that moment of like, something has happened to me. They need a moment to process. Their eyes go wide. Anytime Marcus touches somebody and they become deviant, they just immediately accept the fact that they are deviant. And I wouldn't say they're completely subservient, but they don't really seem like that they're free in the way the game wants them to be portrayed as. Anytime I would free an android as Marcus, I felt like I was just adding a chess piece to the board or adding someone to my stronghold kind of thing. Like, it didn't feel as personal as the game, I think, wanted it to feel. It felt like a gameplay mechanic.
You bringing this up just made me think of this. I'm going to be a parody of myself for a moment. Let's talk Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche famously called Christianity a master and slave morality, where, you are a slave to the doctrines of Christianity. You are not being an individual. We're essentially seeing that here with exactly what you just said, Nomad. Marcus causes deviancy, and they are immediately falling in as one more cog in the machine of this great grand cause. They are trading subserviency to humans to subserviency to Marcus. Not a single one of these new androids with their newfound qualia, phenomenal consciousness, says, let's consider this for a moment. And to be fair, this is a movie, this is a game. These relationships have to be condensed. Otherwise, we would be here for, 40 days instead of, 20 hours. So fine, but all the same, all they're doing is trading one kind of subservience for another. There's no interesting conversations about the ethics of that, about whether this, is the right move for them. And I don't know. I was not expecting Nietzsche to. This isn't a JRPG. I wasn't prepared to talk about Nietzsche, but it just kind of came up. Yeah, that's wow. That is. There are a lot of problems with this touch to deviancy.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't think that any other android has this ability. either, now that I think about it. So yeah, it's very much relegated to Marcus for this exact purpose. But yeah,
actually, until it's not. Connor gets it at the very end, right?
Yes, you're right. Yes,
because plot reasons.
Yeah, I think we're going to use the phrase plot reasons a few more times here, but
David Cage had like one too many screws left over from the build, and he just was like, this can go here. It's fine.
That brings back memories of working on cars, but that's for another day. But
did I always have this spare part?
But still, it's, again, to kind of wrap up my thoughts here, again, when I was playing the game through for the very first time, I just accepted that this is what the game is now, and now I have a cool new game mechanic, so let's see what we can do with it. And we get to test that out pretty quick when we open up a gigantic shipping container a little ways away.
Yeah, you can choose to turn them deviant or just put the lid back on them, which seems so crazy to me. No, thank you. Goodbye. Which is actually what I did. I'm playing Marcus in this time to be very aggressive, but very incompetent at his job. So I'm having him fail literally everything. It's very funny. This will get cut short if you choose not to let the security android come with you. When he asks, he'll say that you're no different than humans and sound the alarms. You have to run out. This section's over. If you let him come with you, he'll tell you about some spare parts that they have in the truck. All we need is the key. So Marcus elects to go get it, and you've got to deal with two of the most inept security guards I've ever seen. You can just walk right in, jam a screwdriver into their electronic schematics to cause a blackout, casually just hide, and they don't see you. They don't look around. This is a small office. They're just like, hey, what's going on here? You can also, I haven't done this, but you can also knock over an oil drum or something outside to distract them. You basically, this Barney and Fife team, you just distract them to get their key, and you steal the truck and get out of there.
Yeah, I kind of like this section for what it was trying to do. Give the player a chance to take a bigger risk for a bigger reward kind of thing. And I like that you had to trick the guards, but once you actually get into this little area and you see how small and condensed it is, it's very, it's another thing that actually broke immersion for me just a little bit, because there is no way they can't see you or hear you. And if you decide to bust up the electrical panel, the sheer act of driving that screwdriver or whatever tool you have into the board is excruciatingly loud. How they don't immediately turn around and see you is baffling to me. But
oh yeah.
But either way, there's actually a point too, and maybe you've done this because you're playing Marcus the way that you described earlier, but you can get caught by the guards. I actually tried to hold them up at gunpoint. You can find a gun, I think, off to the left-hand side of this particular office. And if you don't press the prompts correctly, a fight will ensue. And if it goes horrifically bad, you can actually kill the guards, which, depending on how you play, you don't really want to do that, or maybe you do, but there's a couple of different ways this could end, but ultimately, you do end up stealing the key, or you don't, but I always steal the key here. I never don't.
If you do that, or if you, the security guard calls, the security android calls the rest of the gang, you're going to get some blue blood, and Jericho is going to be all the better. And then Marcus ends with this speech.
I came to Jericho because here androids are free. Free to live in the dark, hoping that no one finds us. Free to die in silence, waiting for a change that's never going to come. But I don't want that freedom. And I'm not going to beg for the right to smile, or love, or stand tall. I don't know about you, but there's something inside me that knows that I am more than what they say. I am alive, and they're not gonna take that from me anymore. Our days of slavery are over. What humans don't want to hear, we will tell them. What they don't want to give, we take. We are people. We are alive. We are free.
We're into chapter 18, the Eden Club. Hank and Connor are about to get frisky. It's a sex club. Cue the bounce chicka wow music. This is a sex club full of androids. Again, look, this brings up a lot of interesting ethical discussions, I think. I was listening, I cannot remember for the life of me if this was Hidden Brain or This American Life, but I remember them doing a discussion on the ethics of sex bots and AI and how that could be like, this is gonna sound crazy, and I promise it's not a weird episode. It's very psychological and ethical, but how autonomous android things, android life forms, could be used to curtail some of the more vile sexual fetishes and sort of be used as a method for therapy in that way, and to kind of keep the crime down. I don't want to go too far into it because one, I'm not prepared to talk about it, and two, it's kind of a graphic subject, and I don't want to just do that without any kind of warnings. The point is, sex in AI is rife for ethical quandaries and philosophical ideas. What does it mean to love? Boom. Biggest question a human being could ask, I think. What does it mean to love? We don't really get to explore any of that. And, you know, to the game's credit, if they tried to explore every little thing that we keep bringing up, this would be a bloated mess of a game. I get it. I do. I'm just saying there's a lot of missed potential. This is like the Star Wars prequels.
No, not really, no.
A lot of missed potential.
How rude.
Some people love them. I'm one of them. I love the prequels. Some people don't. But it's just a lot of missed potential. And I don't know. The more I interact with this game, the more I'm just seeing, loads of things that they could have done that would have been very cool. Sorry, that was a bit of a weird tangent to go on. I apologize.
No apologies necessary. One of the last times I played this game, again, I was playing and my wife was watching me while I was playing, and I remember trying to broach this subject, although I couldn't really put it into words, because the very first time that we come to this sex club, my first thought was, oh, this is going to be fun. But then I immediately kind of started to think about, well, what does this really mean in the larger scheme of the world that they're trying to build? Like, it makes absolute sense for this to exist, but how do people really feel about this? What could we explore when it comes to thinking about the existence of this place and the idea that people can gratify themselves in this way with AI? But I really wanted to ask those questions and try to understand how people feel about it, or understand what our characters think about it, or even just the world at large. Let me bring this up. I don't think we've brought this up yet, and I'm not sure when it triggers, but at some point on the main menu, Chloe, the AI that's watching you through the monitor, will ask you to take a survey, a 10-question survey.
Yeah.
I don't remember all the questions, but the one that sticks out to me is the very first question, which asks you, would you consider being in a relationship with an android that looks and sounds like you, or some variation of that question? You can either answer yes, no, or I don't know. And I remember looking at that question for the very first time, and my answer was ultimately I don't know, because I never really thought about it. And I would love for people to bring that question up in game or let us know what they think. But again, it's just here, and then poof, it's gone.
I answered I don't know too, because this game explores it here as purely sexual, right? We want to break down relationships into the carnal and into the emotional, right? Those are two specific sets of needs that all human beings share. And I think those are two very different sets of needs. So relationship, that's a bit vague. Is it emotional? Is it sexual? Is it both? We don't know. I definitely have different feelings between the two. It is a very interesting thing to explore because, I mean, visually they look identical to humans. I mean, we're playing a game. We can't touch them to feel what they feel like. I would assume they feel identical to humans in terms of skin-to-skin contact. If they are intelligent, if they are aware, if they look, there are a lot of things that suggest that a physical relationship would be something that I think a lot of people could reason with themselves to feel okay with. It's the emotional part that then we're into a whole new territory.
Yes.
that's when it gets into the things like phenomenal consciousness. Is this thing alive? We just saw in the news just recently that one teenager that fell in love, quote unquote, with that chatbot of Game of Thrones and ended up killing himself.
Oh, that's right.
Because he was so like sheltered and needed some kind of contact, but didn't have it. I don't know all of the particulars just off the dome, but we're seeing these ethical questions in real time, and that makes this game really fascinating to cover in 2025, because these AI wasn't like this when this game came out. Maybe they could have predicted it, but I don't think we could have seen just how quickly this would take off and the deleterious effects that it was having on society and businesses. I mean, CEO Healthcare, that is of United Healthcare, that is a terrific example of the public pushing back on not just AI, but AI had a huge part in that. And then, this kid developing romantic attachment to what is essentially a string of code. There's a lot of ethical questions happening in real time. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not trying to derail us too much and, talk about things that we're not prepared to talk about on air. But suffice to say, there's a lot to ponder with regards to this game. And in some ways that's, if art can get you thinking, that's what counts, right?
Yeah, that is the one thing I will say here. Even though these themes and ideas really don't get a chance to breathe or allow us to explore it, at the very least, it has spurned conversation. And I think the game deserves a little bit of credit for that.
Totally. Absolutely. Let's get on with this case. So you're examining this homicide. Gavin says that it was just some pervert that got more action he could handle. What happened?
Gavin.
There's a fella that's in this room. He's dead. There's also a dead. They call them Tracy's. It's just the female sex android. The analysis shows that it wasn't a heart attack like you were told. This was a strangulation. He was murdered. The android has been badly damaged, but Connor is able to revitalize it for just over a minute and a half, which isn't actually true. The timer kind of jumps around based on the dialogue choices you choose. If you choose all the right ones, this is over in like 30 seconds. What happened was the man was beating her. This is her recollection, beating her over and over again. And there was another android in the room for a potential threesome. And he was beating the other android, and she felt like she would be next, and so she strangled him. But now that we know that there was 3, we have to find the deviant that got away. This leads to a great, you're looking. What you're doing is you're probing other androids around to see what they saw. You're probing their memory to see what they saw throughout the day, to track down this deviant. You're under a time limit. Somewhat, the game just kind of does it because it needs to give you something. They say, they wipe the memories of these sex androids every 2 hours. So by my calculations, we have 10 minutes. Okay, David Cage, sure. But you're probing the memories to see what these androids saw, which leads to Connor needing Hank's biometrics to purchase several sex androids all in a row. And he's like, I'm spending all this money, I'm not even having a good time. And it's good. It's funny.
It is very funny, and even more so in the beginning, I like how they just make light of where you are at this point in the middle of a sex club. And as you make your way to the crime scene a little bit beforehand, you can actually walk up to... These androids are actually in like glass tubes, basically, like product on display, basically, and that's how Hank is freeing them with his handprint to purchase them, and the glass goes up and they can come out. But before you get into the actual crime scene, if you hold the L1 button, the game will allow you to look at one of the androids in first person, and you can look up and down and check them out. But then as soon as you let your button go, Hank will turn around and just berate Connor and say,
Connor, the fuck are you doing?
Coming, Lieutenant.
And it's so funny.
Yeah, calling him a pervert and stuff.
It's wonderful. So yeah, they just keep that theme going throughout this entire chase. So it's kind of a breath of fresh air, even though you do have this kind of arbitrary time limit that's imposed on you.
Well, I failed it my first time. I didn't find him in time because there are a lot of androids around. You can and probably will purchase some that just didn't see anything, which is a waste of your time. So I failed it my first time, and I ended up reloading because the route that I was playing, I didn't want to miss what was coming next. And what does come next is tracking the deviant. You find them eventually hiding out among other discarded models, like in the back, like in an employees only sort of warehouse area. And they're standing amongst all these other used and discarded models. And when you look at them with L1, the yellow LED flashes. That's what tips you off. But then Connor gets attacked by another deviant, which leads to a 2v2 between these two androids and Connor and Hank. Just a bunch of QTEs. Now, if you're successful, I didn't fail these, so I'm not sure what happens. Maybe you could speak to that. But if you're successful, you tail them out to a fence. And as they're running, you see them holding hands. And you have the option to shoot the newer one, the one that started this fight, or let it go. If you let it go, well, actually, no matter what happens, you get this information if you shoot him or if you let him go. But basically what happens is this. She didn't mean to kill the guy, but after he killed the android in the room, she knew that she'd be next. And she wanted to be with, quote, her love again. So these two androids are in love. Depending on whether or not you shot the one, they will either run away or the remaining one will blow her brains out with your gun, depending. So, I mean, we're kind of bumping up to what we were just talking about, Nomad, this idea of what does it mean to love? Can sentient beings, when does a sentient being attain the ability to love as we have defined it and as we know it? We don't know because this plays out basically here and it's done. Hank has some more quips about it because this really moves him on a deep level. But outside of that, this thread is severed here, which makes sense if you shot the android because then the grief-stricken lover then blows her own brains out. But, I know it's not that kind of a game, but this especially I would have liked to have seen elaborated on.
Yeah, same here. I appreciated what they were trying to do here, but at the same time, there was really no build up to it. It's just all of a sudden these two androids are in love and can experience love, and Hank has this emotional reaction to it, which when I think back to it, it's actually really touching. It's really starting to get to him as a human, and he's kind of turning his opinion on them. It all works really well for what it is, but we don't get any lead up to it. It's just, this is happening. And whether they escape or we end up killing them here, like you said, it's kind of dropped here. It's another little plaything that we're given to really think about and maybe potentially interact with, but then it's kind of taken away. And I really don't know how I felt about it, and it's a little jarring. I wish we could have learned a little bit more or explored even just that a little bit. Just because some of the themes that we've seen in the game so far, the familial nature between Alice and Kara and Luther now, family. Let's take the path of actual romance, love, that kind of path. I would have loved for them to have done something with this.
It would have been nice too. And they could have justified it because this is where Hank starts to turn. That's what you were getting at. This is where Hank's perception of androids starts to flip. He's seeing them as something more than just pieces of plastic now. And he's got that internal dissonance to work through as well because of the tragedy that happened with his son. Not to mention, the reality that in this world, androids are taking jobs for, what would otherwise be American citizens, we could presume. So there's a little bit of that, but mainly the son thing. He's got that dissonance within him that he needs to work through. And, if we could have just magically given this studio like X amount of dollars, this is probably in the top 3 things where I would have been like, hey, do more with this. First of all, take a little bit off the top for yourself. Don't let Marcus like just touch people to cause deviancy. I believe in you. You can work around that. Number 2, you know, more love exploration.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, and to fill in the gaps of how the fight can turn out, I did I did allow myself to lose the fight because it's actually another piece of the flow chart, and I was trying to get as much completion as I could. Nothing different happens if you lose the fight. What ends up happening is if you fail all the QTEs, the Tracy that's attacking Connor will do significant damage to him. It's almost comical. And when they throw themselves off the back of the loading dock, traditionally, if you win the fight, Connor gets back to his feet and they rush towards the fence and there's more QTE fighting. If you lose the fight, Connor just stays on his back and the Tracys start their exposition at that point. So no real changes and no real weight to failure here.
Huh. I was not expecting that. Interesting.
Nor was I, but I guess if you want to complete the flowchart, allow yourself to get stabbed repeatedly with a screwdriver.
And I think we'll finish off today with one more chapter. It's a short one. 19, The Pirate's Den. This is Luther, Kara, and Alice have stolen Zlatko's car, which is I wrote that they're driving it, but it's kind of driving us. It's an automatic car. Everybody's just kind of sitting in it, you know. They've figured out all the kinks and ethical dilemmas with that. Geez, talk about ethical dilemmas in real life. They're driving. It's very snowy. You can turn on the radio. For me, whenever I was writing these notes, public opinion had turned hostile. Public opinion is its own relationship meter. By the end of my first run, everybody supported androids. This run that I'm going through, I want no part of that. I want everybody to see us as a pariah. That's what I'm going for this time. But you'll get information on that now. You get to make small talk with Luther. The car breaks down, and as luck would have it, you know, Kara is wondering, what do we do? Luther suggests walking. We can't do that because Alice will freeze. But there's an abandoned theme park called Pirate Cove up ahead. So we go there, we search for shelters. It's mostly banged up game booths, but there is a little like lodge kind of deal, right? Like it looked like what is that? Help me out here.
Yeah, lodge I think is the best term for this because you're going down this long stretch of the amusement park. And you're looking in these game stalls and things like that, and you'll have Kara shine her flashlight in, and she'll get like little thought bubbles. The roof is unstable, unsafe for Alice, or won't hold the 3 of us. And then, yes, we come across it. Almost looks like a house, but it definitely lodge is the best term here.
The roof. That's right. Inside, you know, you get Alice all set up and get her some, you know, warmth. You can talk with Luther. If you see the RA9 writing in here, you can talk to him about it. This kind of furthers that idea that it's a religion. Luther doesn't believe in it, but he wants to. Kara doubts that it/he exists, RA9. Luther is a believer. That's what it is. You can also talk about Alice, and this is important. Luther will ask Kara, have you noticed anything about Alice? And you can answer yes or no. If you say yes, you'll just say, yes, she's so special, huh? But this is the first inkling we get, like, something, like, what is Alice's deal? Luther sees it. And according to the wiki, a lot of other people have seen it. Some of them, I think it's a bit of a stretch, IMO. But Luther definitely asks here. You can also talk to Alice here as well. You know, she will ask, if we're going to be a family like these posters, why didn't my dad love me? Things like that. You can fill in that maternal role, or you can be cold and distant and heartless. Up to you. But before before any more conversation can happen, this group of androids break in. And because of the lighting and the way that David Cage frames his shots, we think that they're like a legion of evil robots, androids. And you can either use a gun that you find in Luther's bag or just shout at them. The outcome is the same no matter what. I thought that you could shoot them, so I chose to use Luther's gun. You don't. You just shoot in the air. It's like a warning shot. But what these guys are, these are like, if you've played Planescape Torment, this is like many as one. This is a collective group of androids that kind of share like one brain. They call themselves the Jerrys, which is a great name. And they say, like, we're not going to hurt you. We just wanted to make sure you aren't humans, because sometimes humans come in just to hurt us for fun. They see Alice and they're like, oh, what a sweet little girl. Come on, we haven't had a human in so long. And they end up taking you to the merry-go-round. And this chapter ends very upliftingly with Kara helping Alice up onto the merry-go-round. She's smiling for the first time in ages. Kara says ever, which, given her home life, I don't doubt it. And, the Jerrys are a friend. They're going to be a friend to the end, which is, that they become a final chapter important thing. But this chapter is one of the few chapters that ends on a positive note. We get to see Alice just forgetting for a moment and being a kid. And it's nice.
Yeah, I really like the chapter for that. For me, even though Kara's being painted as this motherly type of character, and that's really what drove her to deviancy and drives her through the narrative up to this point, I, as a player, never really found a way to connect with Alice. Like, her personality never really shined through for me. There's one moment where she questions why her father was the way that he was, and I think there's even another moment sort of upcoming. I won't spoil it too much, but she does question, like, why are humans and androids so different? Why do we kind of hate each other, kind of thing? But those are the only moments that we ever get out of this little girl. So I had a hard time attaching myself to her. Until this particular moment, I think it was so well done. The music was great, and just that picture of watching Alice, even though she's alone, on this merry-go-round and actually watching her smile. Maybe it's the dad in me, I don't know, but I smiled pretty heartily here, and it was nice because this was probably one of the nicer, more warm chapters that we get to experience. So this was a nice change of pace.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. That's an aspect of the human condition that I don't have, right? I don't have children, so those neurons weren't firing for me. I kind of am still seeing Alice the way that you did. She doesn't. I mean, you said her personality, and the first thing I thought was, what personality? She kind of exists as a prop for Kara's arc, and that's kind of it. She just serves to further Kara's maternal strives, right? Her strive for motherhood. Again, that's if you're viewing it like I am. I think it's important to highlight that different people have different life experiences. So this could work for somebody that has children, that has the fatherhood or the motherhood perspective through which to view this. I think that's very interesting. I also agree with you. The music does a lot of the lifting here. It's very well scored. Kara and Luther, everybody's animated really well because mocap. And also the snow. I mean, snow on a merry-go-round. There's just, it almost forces you into a nostalgic mood.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And maybe it's cliche to say, but this was a very magical moment. There was just something very magical and very charming about the whole thing.
And, as much as we want to be critics about it and critique everything, ultimately, if something does make you feel something, then it's worthwhile, right? That's almost the end of the conversation, because it's difficult to argue against that. It's the same tenet as like, well, if it sounds good, what's the big deal? It's sort of the same thing. I'm learning a new DAW, a new digital audio workstation. So little peek behind the curtain. Thanks for being patient with me. But it's sort of like that. If it made you feel something, that's got to be mentioned first and foremost. That weighs heavier, that spends heavier than the rest of what we're talking about. And I guess with that, I think for today, that's enough. That leaves roughly 11, 12 chapters left. Next time, interestingly, starting with the scene that won Brian Deckhart the role of Connor.
Is that true? I didn't realize that was, but once we get to the scene and we describe it, I think we'll understand why. That's perfect.
It makes sense, given given how it can go, and it's just him and Clancy Brown, and I cannot imagine that they cast Connor before casting Clancy Brown. I swear they had to have written that character for him. But I think that's all for today. We'll pick it up next time and go to the end. How are you feeling about it so far?
I'm feeling really good about this so far. The points that we're hitting are spot on, I think, and it's really good to actually talk this out and really get the feelings that I think, myself anyway, have had for a while that I just haven't really had a chance to articulate. So this has been a really, really good discussion so far.
I'm glad, man. I feel the same way. We're going to get into a lot of the salient and germane points that really tie this work together. Some rugs that tie the room together, so to speak. And, there's more positive to come. There's certainly more negative, depending on who you ask, but there's more positive to come. Especially, this next scene is a great one, in particular. I think this next one is really moving. I wasn't sure, I thought about ending it on the next one or maybe the one after that. There's several different places we could stop over the next few chapters, but we've been going for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and neither of us slept super well last night from what I understand. So,
but either way, I think the discussion today was really well done. And yeah, this is fun. I really appreciate you bringing me on for this. I always wanted to talk about this game and have a really good conversation about it. So selfishly, this makes me very happy.
I'm glad to hear it, man. The pleasure is mine. Speaking of pleasure, only about a week and a half has transpired since we last spoke, in real time, that is. Any news from the Retro Wildlands? If folks didn't hear the last time, go check that out so you can hear about them, or click the link in the description. Either is fine. Any new updates from over there?
So yes, I am hard at work on our next episode. I am almost done putting together an episode on Super Tecmo Bowl for the Super Nintendo, as well as the original Nintendo. I'm going to get that out before Super Bowl Sunday, so depending on when you're hearing this episode should be out in the wild already. It was very fun for me to put together. For those of you that haven't listened to my show before, I really love sharing my personal memories wherever I can with the game. And this particular game is very special to me because I got to play it and experience it a lot with my stepfather. And it really bonded us, and it gave me a love of football, even though I don't watch football very much anymore. But I love sharing those stories with people. So if nothing else, if you want to give it a listen and just hear a 40-year-old gamer just reminisce about some good times, I think this will be an episode that everyone will enjoy. And I'm also working on scheduling some more live streams where I jump online and play a game while you all watch. I just got done playing through Resident Evil 3 on the original PlayStation, and I think, this is subject to change, the next game I'm going to play through is Dino Crisis, which is Resident Evil with dinosaurs.
I had a not so fun experience with that one. We almost did that, Phil and I, of deleted saves. We ended up doing Silent Hill 1 instead, which, man, I didn't love Silent Hill 1, but I had a good time. I struggled with Dino Crisis, and I'm glad because I almost bought it on Dreamcast, and it's expensive on Dreamcast, so I bought it on PS1 instead, and struggled pretty hard.
Yeah, the puzzles specifically in this game are what usually bring me down. They're pretty well thought out for the most part, but they can also be very tedious, so I'm anxious to see how that's going to translate to a live stream experience. I always want to make sure that I'm entertaining those that are watching me, and I don't want to get bogged down with a puzzle or two, but we'll see how it goes. I'm very excited to do that, so if nothing else, check out the Retro Wildlands on your favorite social media platform. I'm practically on all of them, and as soon as I get that next show locked down, you will be the first to know.
Well, there you have it. You can find all of that by clicking the links in the description, as you're always doing. You can find our stuff there too. No news from me. Same old, same old. Find us on socials. Give the show a rating, and a review if you haven't. Much appreciated if you could. Join the Discord, start a discussion. Makes me happy to see that place popping. But until then, I think we can cap it, and we'll finish it off next week. So, thank you once again, Nomad. Genuinely appreciate you coming here. It's always a pleasure. And it's always a pleasure knowing that you listeners out there are enjoying things. My name is Rick. I'm your host, as always. We'll see you next time. Take care.